The season is over in January. We will play 40 games all season because we were knocked out of both cup competitions in the first round. Being knocked out to Grimsby is the biggest disgrace I've seen in my absolute lifetime. So we needed to win today. We needed a cup run to give us something this season. Otherwise, it's one game a week to the end of the season. It's going to be a long ride to the end of the season. And what happens? We get knocked out in the first round of the FA Cup to Brighton. Now, I could sit here and I could talk about certain players. I could talk about the midfield. I could talk about Dalot. I've been talking about Dalot and our best chances falling to him all season. I've been talking about the midfield and the issues we have all season. But it's time to call out the Glazers and Ineos. This is not about Amorim. This is not about Fletcher. This is not about Ollie. It's not about Carrick. Today is about Ineos and the Glazers. They are responsible for this. They are responsible for the fall of this club. And, too many fans are focused right now on point scoring. See, Amorim was sacked and things didn't change. We could beat Man City next week 3-0 with Ollie in charge. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, look, Ollie won 3-0. We lost to them 3-0 a couple of months ago. No, this is not about point scoring. This is not about I was right, you were wrong. This is one game. This is about the fans coming together instead of arguing with each other and calling out the idiots at the top of this club. I called out Ineos last January. I called out Ineos last February. I called out Ineos and the Glazers last March, last April, last May after the Europa League final. I called them out in June, July, and I massively called out Ineos and the Glazers in August for not signing a midfielder. I called them out in September for not giving Amorim a midfielder because we were seeing the issues. I called them out in October. I called them out in November. I called them out in December, and I'm calling Ineos and the Glazers out in January again a year later. It doesn't matter what happens at this football club. Every month, I'm sat here calling out Ineos and the Glazers. The one consistency. Ruben Amorim was appalling. Ruben Amorim had a 32% win rate. He couldn't beat West Ham, Wolves at home, a 10-man Everton, Grimsby. You can think Ruben Amorim deserved to be sacked, but you can also be aware of the fact that the Glazers are the biggest issue. When Ruben Amorim was sacked, even though I think it was the right decision, and I stand by that, I said things won't change. If you look at my video when Ruben Amorim was sacked, if you go and watch my video I made the day Ruben Amorim was sacked, I said, I'm not celebrating this, guys. I said, Ruben Amorim was sacked. He deserved to be sacked. But I said in the video on the day Ruben Amorim was sacked, I'm not celebrating Ruben Amorim being sacked, guys. And some people said, why, Alice? He was rubbish. I said, the reason I'm not celebrating Ruben Amorim being sacked is because we still got the same incompetent people above him. Ruben Amorim was part of the problem. He wasn't good enough for me, but he was a small part of the problem. And I said that a million times. Ruben Amorim for me needed to go, but I said until the people above Ruben Amorim go, things aren't going to get that much better. I don't think Ruben Amorim is doing a good job, but it's not you sack Ruben Amorim, you bring in a new manager, and all of a sudden we win the league. No, Ruben Amorim was a small part of a bigger problem. And I said this on the day Ruben Amorim was sacked. He was sacked because he called out Ineos and the Glazers. And that's why I would not celebrate Ineos sacking Ruben Amorim. He wasn't sacked for his poor performances. He wasn't sacked for Grimsby. He wasn't sacked for Spurs. He wasn't sacked for Everton, Brentford, West Ham. He was sacked. He was sacked because he called out the ownership. And that's why I refused to celebrate Ruben Amorim being sacked, because I said I worry for the next manager. And people will say, Darren Fletcher got things wrong today. Darren Fletcher's setup was appalling. Why aren't you holding Darren Fletcher to the same standards as Ruben Amorim? Because Darren Fletcher didn't ask for this job. Darren Fletcher has never managed a football club in his life, has no managerial experience. And he's just been brought in for 2 days to handle the mess that the Glazers created. I'm not going to go on to Darren Fletcher. What's the point in going in on a manager that's an interim for 2 games? I went on Ruben Amorim in his tactics some games because we literally, spent 15 million to appoint him. He had 5 years experience. He had 14 months. And he got a lot of calls wrong. This isn't about Darren Fletcher. This isn't about Amorim. This is, too many fans of point scoring. This is about the incompetent owners. The incompetent owners. And I saw some tweets that I agree with. Under Ineos, Man United backed, then sacked Ten Hag, then sacked Ashworth, appointed, then sacked Amorim, oversaw the club's worst result in 50 seasons, and the shortest season over 100 years. Caretaker to interim, they haven't yet been in place for 2 years. Just exposes the mess of this football club. The mess of this football club. And this is why I refuse to celebrate or get happy or get giddy at Ruben Amorim being sacked. This is why I said I'm worried for the next manager, because these owners. And you know what the thing is? And I said this. They'll distract us with Ollie. We'll announce Ollie tomorrow. we'll announce the new manager tomorrow. They'll distract us by announcing a new manager tomorrow. Distract us from the fact they've done F all in January. You showed your hand. You showed you had 65 million for Anton Semenyo, and you've done F all in January. You've done F all in January. I said interim or Amorim, I don't care. You have to sign a midfielder in January, because whether you sack Amorim or not, and I said this at the beginning of January before Amorim was sacked, I said whether you sack Amorim or not, whoever comes in is going to need a midfielder. Whatever manager comes in is going to need a midfielder. They have to sign one in January. You have 65 million. You showed your hand for Semenyo, not one midfielder. And they won't sign a midfielder, and they'll use this new manager, interim manager bounce for the next week to hide behind. And then they'll hope we beat Manchester City and they can put out some positive PR. They're going to hope we beat City and can put out some positive PR. And they'll use the new manager this week to hide behind the fact that they are doing nothing in January. We all need to come together. I said this, today isn't about point scoring, because we could beat Man City 3-0 and we could say, oh, well done, Ole Amorim lost 3-0 to these lots. This isn't about point scoring. This is, we all need to come together as Man United fans to change the ownership. If we keep arguing with each other, if we try and keep point scoring with each other, things are not going to change. We need to continue to hold this ownership accountable. And the problem is, there's a couple of people in the media with big voices that will not call out Ineos, will not call out this ownership so they can work with Manchester United. And they will suck up to this ownership so they can work with Manchester United. We need to call them out. I said this a year ago, January 19th, when we lost 3-1 to Brighton and Ruben Amorim threatened to quit Man United. Ruben Amorim threatened to quit Man United January 19th last year, 11 games into being Man United manager, because when he lost 3-1 to Brighton. And this is what I said after that match. This is about Ruben Amorim. I said this about Ruben Amorim January 2025. How can you hire a new manager mid-season and ignore the January window, especially with impending departures? Amorim clearly needs a wing back. This was before we brought in Dorgu. Yet halfway through January, Ineos still insists he works with the current squad. The team doesn't look like scoring. It's obvious we need a left wing back and a left 10. These are 10 Args players, and under him, we still look like a team destined for 13th. We're 13th for a reason. We need better players. Recruitment has been shocking. I said this a year ago. I'm basically saying the same thing a year later. You've sacked a manager that plays a 3-4-3. You sold all the wingers because the manager plays a 3-4-3, and you brought in loads of 10s. You know, Cunha's a 10. Well, to be fair, Mbeumo's can play winger. Mbeumo and Amad are only wingers. But Cunha is a 10. Mason Mount is a 10. You know, you got rid of Rashford, Garnacho, Anthony Sancho. Cool, great. But they were wingers. So there's no wingers because we've now gone, okay, this manager doesn't play with wingers. He plays with 10s. So we bring in the 10s. Now we sacked the manager in January. And now we've got a manager who wants to play wingers. Mason Mount was non-existent on the right-hand side today. Shea Lacey was so much better when he came on. And I think the ref was a twat for giving him a red. Look, but do you know what? I hope no one gives Shea Lacey hate. I hope not one of you gives Shea Lacey hate, because at least he showed something. I think half of the players couldn't be bothered today, but at least Shea Lacey gave it crap. Do you remember when Hannibal Meshby came on versus Liverpool? We were losing 5-0 and Hannibal Meshby gave a bit here and there and probably should have been sent off. Shea Lacey gave something that other players didn't give. So I don't want to see anyone give Shea Lacey stick. If you give Shea Lacey stick, you're a twat. He's an 18-year-old kid, and at least he cares, unlike some of these players. But I can't. It's the worst part is, a year ago I'm saying the same thing. Right now I'm saying we need a midfielder, which I was saying in August, and I was saying for ages. A guy is in a midfielder we signed for 3 years. But a year ago I'm saying the same thing. You bring in Amorim mid-season, you won't bring in a wing back. You won't bring in a left 10. We need a left 10. Remember Garnacho was stinking up last year. I'm now saying we're in January again. Oh, we need a midfielder, we need a left winger. How many years in a row do we ignore the January window when we desperately need to do something? This is my tweet from a year ago. Brighton as well, under Ruben Amorim. Every manager, every January, there's something we need and we don't do. And City, when they were struggling last January, they go get Marmoush. They go get Nicole Gonzalez. And City, who went from 8th to 4th, because they invested in January last year. City were 8th going into the January window last year. They ended up finishing 3rd, didn't they? We are 6th. There's a really good opportunity to get Champions League football this season, but we ain't going to do anything in January. That is the biggest problem. It's toxic at United. We need someone to take over this club with a lot of money, a lot of motivation to make the club the best it can be. It's not about making money out of the club. It's about making sure this club is a success. The Glazers need to go. Wilcox, Vivel, Barada, Ratcliffe can F off with them. You know, I don't want to talk about Delo being an idiot in attacking positions and having 1v1s and our best chances. I don't want to talk about Mason Mount ghosting. I don't want to talk about Fletcher obviously not good enough for the job, but we knew that with Darren Fletcher coming in. We knew that he wasn't going to change much. He's got no experience. I don't want to be talking about the next manager because I said when we sacked Amorim. I'm worried for the next manager because they've still got to work with the same idiots. You know, I don't want to talk about Shea Lacey getting red. You know what? At least he cared. At least he gave something. You know, I thought Maino was probably one of our better players, and the stats back that up. You know, he was pretty decent, but I don't want to talk about, okay, we look better with Maino on the pitch and try and point score. No. I want to keep this video focused at the ownership and the fact that new January, same problems. Thank you for watching. Bye.